to Rhythm Railroad. I'm doing just a quick update on my coal facility area here that I'm working on. The last video I put up was just on the flood loader building, which is this here, and I explained the mechanism that I use with the servo, for the hopper gate, and then also how to get the coal into the building from the other side, which is my closet. So all that is hidden back there, and check out that video if you want to see more about that. But what I'm doing now is creating some kind of a port scene here for a barge. I cut this out the other day and just basically lowered it. So this is what used to be here, and then created some kind of wall here that eventually is going to look like a steel wall, like what you would see in a port. But I am scratch building this large barge here from a combination of styrene and wood, and it's coming out pretty good. I'm not looking to make it perfect, but kind of look like a barge. I still have to make a little pocket here with the coal and all that stuff. But anyways, the idea is that the tugboats push the barge in, park it here, and then there's a large crane that can move this way that would pick up the material and dump it in this area here. So I'm gonna have these large mounds of coal here, with a retaining wall, obviously, so the coal doesn't go pouring into the sea. And then from there, the idea is that I picked up these 3D printed conveyor belts. So I got 3 of them, and I'm gonna basically make it run from here, where the piles are, all the way up through the back here to the top of the building, and that's how you would get the coal from the barge up to the loader, which would then bring it onto the train cars, and from there it would go on its way. Now, this is not really what I wanted to show you, even though this is new. What I want to show you is what I'm working on as far as unloading the cars. So the concept here, and by the way, pardon the disaster area. I have stuff everywhere, but this happens every time I start a new project. I end up, putting things everywhere, and then I get sidetracked and I start something else, and then, that's how it goes here in my layout. So sorry about that. But the idea now is that the coal that is now loaded makes its way around the entire layout. And I have a few things in mind. It could either just go directly through the crossovers here to the outside track, which is where the unloading facility is, or it could take any other. You could take the short line here in the front, or the other main that goes slightly different direction. But I wanted to show some kind of distance between this building and the unloading facility. So once I took the train out, it's a long way. You could carry, you could basically cover a lot of distance, come around the peninsula. So it feels like you're going somewhere rather than just dumping it right next door. And then what I figured is the best location would be off-site, so not where you can see it on the layout. There was no way for me to get it up here and unload it so that it would recycle itself back to here necessarily. I just didn't see a good spot for that anywhere on the upper level, which would be ideal. I know many people do that, but I'm happy with what I decided to do, and that is to take it into this block here on the other side, which this is basically the shower that I'm not using. It's not working, so it's basically another closet. And as you can see, I got my train coming through right here because I'm unloading it. So this connection here has a little portal here that goes to where I want to show you. So I'm gonna just get under there and I'll show you what I mean. So here we are in the shower that's not functioning. And the idea is that, originally this was just a pass-through that I had built because I didn't want to have to take the train all the way around that way and then back into this pocket, because there's a pocket on the other side of the wall. So I figured if I can get a few cars unloaded here, it would seem like it's going to some other location, and then I could take the load and either manually bring it to the other side, or I'm thinking of doing some kind of hosing that goes up and through using air from a compressor to push the load into the container. But that's a lot more, I don't know, that might be getting too complicated. So we'll just keep it simple for now. I'm just gonna take it over manually. Now, right now I just have, it's just a stool, and I just have this thing propped up here because I'm testing everything. But let me show you the mechanism that I came up with. It's not supposed to be like, it's not supposed to look like a real thing. It's supposed to just be functional. I'm not gonna do any scenery here, obviously. So it's just gonna be where, somebody, if I'm running a session, somebody will be sitting here unloading the train, while the engineer would be on the other side, taking direction from the person controlling this to move the train forward and so on and so forth. But the idea is that I want to make it a through, like a continuous situation with very few stops. So I was trying to get 3 or 4 cars unloaded at once, but because I had to make a turnout here, by the time I get through the curve and to the straight spot right here, I only was able to get 2 cars in, which is fine. It just makes it a little bit more interesting, but it does make it a little slower, but I don't care. Normally these rotary dumpers are only 1 car at a time anyway, so this is actually twice as fast, I guess. I was going to simply use this track here to basically pivot the whole track down, but I was very scared to cut into this because this thing is just floating here. I mean, it is attached on both sides very firmly, but I was afraid, it's never going to come out straight if I'm doing it by, using some kind of saw or whatever. So I figured, let me leave those 3 tracks the way they are from my original setup, and I'll just put a little offshoot here so that I can mess around as much as I want, since it's the first time I do this. And if I make a mistake, I just detach it, and that doesn't get affected. So it's more like a safety thing for me. That I didn't want to destroy what I already had built. So this is basically just a little piece of wood that I cut here and here. And then what I did is I put hinges under it so that the whole thing, sorry if I'm moving the camera too much, the whole thing can pivot like this. So obviously I glued the cork bed and the track, and I measured and I made sure that everything was aligned. So the cars roll through there just fine. I haven't powered them up yet, so I haven't tested the locomotives, but just from doing more track work on the rest of my layout, I know that it'll most likely work. Even if there's a little gaps here, I'm going to power this track so that once I jump the gap, there's still power here. I also used Electrofrog Pico Code 55 turnouts. Here's the frog wire right here, and another one here, because I know that when you run the trains really slow, you want the least amount of problems. So by having power all throughout the frog and everything, it'll avoid any skips or things like that, or at least as many as we can possibly avoid. So the next thing I did once I got all the track done, and I tested that everything was pivoting freely, is that I developed some kind of bracing system, because once you flip this down, the cars have to stay not only on the track, meaning the wheels have to be pressed up against the track, but also you don't want them to fall out. So the L bracket here that I developed hold the car from pushing out, and then the top part hold the car from pushing up, or when it's upside down, from pushing down. And I didn't want to make a lot of braces, because I was thinking maybe I'll do 2 for this car and 2 for this car, but then I'm blocking the coal from coming out, so I wanted to do the least amount of bracing as I could possibly do. And then with that said, I did I noticed that they were they were rocking back and forth this way, so I made, just out of plain styrene, I tried to use some thicker styrene, but I made these triangle braces as support to kind of right them, to make sure they were straight up and down, and that's now they're nice and steady. I might even make some that go out the sides here, just to avoid any kind of movement this way, because the other way it's steady now. Just to show you what I use as far as material, Just get the bags. These are just styrene, you know, these tubings that they sell. So this is a solid square kind of piping, not piping, but just you know, just a section. It looks like that. And again, the number I'm using is 186 from Evergreen. And that fits exactly inside, well, not exactly, with a little tiny bit of play inside of this hollow square tubing. So this is number 253. So what happens is, you know, the other tube slides right into, let me see if I can show you, right into that, and it's tight enough so that it doesn't wiggle around, but it's also loose enough so that it slides, because you want it to slide, so it can go up and down. Now you're gonna say, well, why did you even bother with that? Let me just show you how this works here. It's hard to hold the camera, but one second. Okay, so here's the solid square tubing, and here's the hollow square tubing. As you can see, it slides through nicely, but at the same time, it doesn't have any play. Very tiny amount of play when you move it. So that was perfect for what I was looking for. And going back to what I was saying is, you know, you would figure, well, why even bother with that? Well, I didn't realize that the locomotives are taller than the cars, as you can see there. So as the train's coming through, the locomotive's got to clear these brackets, otherwise, you know, it'll crash into them. So I had to devise some kind of system that I could bring up, so I can have some kind of clearance. So as you can see, they both come up, and right now I'm working on how I'm going to get these to come up automatically. I want to have some kind of like a servo or some kind of motor that pushes them up and holds them there until the train gets there and then releases them. Not necessarily fast like that, but you know, you know, so that it looks a little bit more professional when they come down. The reason I used springs is because I basically just bought these from the hardware store. They're like very light springs. It's a little bigger than like a pen size spring. But you don't want a lot of spring because you might break the bond here from the, you know, they're just glued on there, so you don't want too much. So the spring, what happens is when the car gets under there, the spring is constantly putting pressure downward force on the car, and just basically, you know, pushing it against the rail nice and firm. So when you flip it, these things don't have the tendency to, you know, fall out. So even if the servo or whatever I'm using under there to control this, you know, fails, this is still going to default to that. So it doesn't matter. You know, the last thing you want is for the full cars to be like around here, and these things fail, and now you got cars, you know, falling off and going down to the floor, breaking everything. So that's that. So, you know, now what happens is, and by the way, I have to get some kind of pin here or some kind of lock here until I get my mechanism figured out for this bridge. But I want to put some kind of pin, you know, that just kind of locks this in place here for safety. But now the train can come through, you know, the servos, I'm assuming I would hit a button or something, and the servos would push these up. Train comes through, spots the two cars, and then I hit the button on the opposite direction, or the toggle switch, brings them down. Now I'm set to unload this thing. And then obviously I would, you know, turn it and dump, bring it back up, and then push that button again to release the cars, and then they're on their way, and you would go to the next load. What I'm thinking for the mechanism to control this thing is a linear actuator or some kind of a screw that runs this way. And as the linear actuator pulls that way, it lowers, you know, some kind of a connecting point under there. It lowers this and pulls it so that it ends up there, and then obviously it pushes it back up so that it ends up there. So I'm gonna try, I don't know if I can pull this off with one hand. Probably not. I'm gonna just do it on a separate video, and then I'll show that to you. I'm gonna try to just run some cars through so you can see how they all load. I'll be back.